In this video, I want to have a look at simplifying surds. So sort of two rules that I want to have a look at and then look at some examples as well. So our first example is if we have the square root of a number and then we square that, then we're just going to get x. It works if we have it written the other way as well. If we have a number squared and then we take the square root, because they're opposite or inverse operations, we just end up with that number. So let's have a look at some examples of that. So we have three examples here. The first one, we've got the square root of 7 squared. And that is just going to give us 7. So instead of our x, we've got a 7 for this one. The other way you can think about that is the square root of 7 squared. When we square something, it means we times it by itself. So we'd have the square root of 7 times the square root of 7. And when we multiply, we can actually multiply the numbers underneath. And we'd get the square root of 49 because 7 times 7 is 49. But we know that the square root of 49 is 7. So the shortcut is just to recognize that relationship. All right, for this second one, it's slightly more complicated. So when we've got that squared, we need to square the 3 and square the root 5. So that's going to be 3 squared, and then we have the square root of 5 all squared as well. So 3 squared would give us 9, and that root 5 squared would give us 5. So our final answer is going to be that 9 times 5, which would be 45. And our last one here, again, we're going to have that minus 2 squared. You need to be really careful when we've got a negative squared that you do still keep it in your brackets if you're putting it in your calculator. And then we have that square root of 3 squared. So that minus 2 squared is minus 2 times minus 2, which is 4, times this whole section will just give us 3. So our final answer will be 12. The second rule I want to have a look at is if we've got the square root of two things multiplied together, then that's equivalent to the square root of the first one times the square root of the second one. So to be able to use this in practical questions, we need to know our square numbers. So 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 2 times 2, which is 4, 3 squared is 9, 4 squared is 16, 5 squared, 25, 6 squared, 36, and you should know quite a few of these. The better you are at recognizing these numbers, the easier these questions are going to be. So it's probably a good idea to know up to about 12 squared. So 11 squared would be 121, and 12 squared would be 144. You can remember more of them as well, but those are sort of your main ones. So let's have a look at some examples. All right, so our first example here is the square root of 50, and we want to try and simplify that. So what we want to do is we want to have a look at the number 50, and we want to see if any of these square numbers or any other square numbers are factors of 50. So for 50, we could use the 25. So we're going to write that 50 instead as 25 times 2. So now we can use this rule, and if we've got the square root of 25 times 2, that's the same thing as the square root of 25 times the square root of 2, and we know that the square root of 25 is 5, so that whole thing will simplify to 5 root 2. So we can do the same steps or the same process with this root 12. So with that 12, we could use our 4. So we could break 12 into 4 times 3, which will be the same thing as the square root of 4 times the square root of 3. And we know that the square root of 4 is 2, so we'd end up with 2 root 3. Now this one, same sort of process, but we've got this number hanging out the front that we just need to be careful of as well. So that's 72. We're going to break that into 36 times 2. And the more you do of these, the better you get at recognizing which of these square numbers will be factors here. But you can just go through and test them. So you can pick 72 and go through and pick square numbers and divide and see if you get whole numbers as your answer. So then we can break that into 3 square root 36 times square root of 2. That square root of 36 is 6. So this part is going to become 3 times 6 times the square root of 2. And I've run out of room, so I'm just going to put it over here. And 3 times 6 is 18. So we would have 18 root 2. All right, now very last one, we're going to simplify the numerator, and then we're going to see if we can cancel out. So that 405 is going to be 81 times 5. And again, the more of these you do, the better you get at picking them, but you can go through and use your calculator to help you out. And then we know that we can split that into the square root of 81 times the square root of 5 all over 9. We know that the square root of 81 is 9, so that numerator is going to become 9 root 5, and we've still got over 9. And if we have 9 root 5 over 9, those 9s divide through, and we're just going to be left with the square root of 5 as our answer. So let's have a look at simplifying surds.